Hello and thank you for watching. This is STSC back again with part 2 of this series where I'm revamping Zodiac. Last time I built Cancer, and as you can see, he's a little bit different than you last saw him. So before we get on to the next part, let's take a look at what's changed with him. So let's take a look at how Cancer has changed since last week's video. Right off the bat, the first thing you'll probably notice is that he's very close to being properly colored now. I've swapped out as many of the parts as I could for black or dark gray, and I think he's looking pretty good. There's obviously some bits I wasn't able to find in my collection, and there's stuff like the legs, which I'm thinking I might make black on the final model. I just had these pieces in dark gray, but not in black, so I made it gray for now. But yeah, for the most part, he's pretty close to the final colors, I think, and yeah, he looks pretty sharp. Just a nice looking crab. But without further ado, let's get him into robot mode. So you just swing up this, bring the camera back a little bit so you can see it more clearly. Then this is one change I've made. For solidity's sake, these are now rounded elements, which have a hole that can accept a bar. And then I have a robot hand here, so that there's actually a knee joint now. And instead of stud friction, it swings out. You may have noticed in the last video, these fell off constantly. So now they're much more solid and they shouldn't fall off really at all. So you just bring the legs down. Get these legs positioned into shoulder spikes. And this is the formation I think I'm going with, where they're kind of swept off to the side like that. I just think it looks pretty cool. Straighten out the claws to be his hands, and I think I kind of like the idea of articulating them kind of like this to be more like big robot claws rather than the crab claws he has, so they're a little bit more robotic. And last but not least, flip up his head and get him to stand. There we have Cancer. Now in this mode, you can see the other big change I made. I talked about possibly removing the waist swivel, and I went ahead and did that. I think it just makes the whole model more proportionate, and it should help with combined mode. So yeah, there he is in robot mode. Cool looking dude. He is a little bit top heavy and a little bit tricky to get standing. I might still fiddle with the feet to make him hopefully more solid. But you can get him standing, so, and when he is standing, you can, well, he will fall over, but he stands solid enough. But, again, I might fiddle with the feet to make him more solid. But enough rambling, let's get him into his combined mode. So you just flip down the head. Oh, don't break off the foot. Swing these back up, kind of like this. And now another benefit to making these rounded is that they're much more loose. There's a lot easier clearance to rotating them. So when they're kibble on the back of Zodiac, they'll now be able to get out of the way much easier, which is one thing I was worried about, having them be kibble back there. But so like if you have to move this leg joint, they can now swing back a lot easier. But then I do really like this look of having the leg kind of gripping the thigh, so that's probably what I'll be doing on the final model. I've just been sticking with that look. And convert these into their feet form. And there you go, you have Zodiac's lower half. And again, I think it looks pretty cool. You can mess with the posing to make him look a little bit more menacing and a little less goofy. But there's a fair bit of articulation here. It's solid, it's nice, it looks good. Yeah, I think this is a pretty good base for a combiner. And without further ado, we can get to making the next part of it. With Cancer out of the way, it's time to move on to our second component. And I've decided to do Taurus next. Pisces is relatively simple in terms of transformation, and Taurus I don't really have a strong idea for, so I wanted to get the harder one out of the way first. So to get this started, I'm going to build his cow head or bull head, and I have sourced these two barbs. Then we're going to put those into a Travis brick here. And you have a head started. Then I want him to have an eye or eyes, so a little red plate. Then a black plate. And that will line up to then put a second modified brick there. And we can get a 1x3 tile onto there. And we have a bit of a bull head. It might be a bit simplistic. I might change it later on. One thing I have considered is kind of, I guess, stealing from IXRoll.ix's character Auxiliary and having it kind of transform to be the robot head. I think that's a very clever trick from Auxiliary, but I don't know if I'll go with that because I do feel a little bit not great about the idea of straight up stealing a transformation bit like that. But there we go. We have the head. Now, bringing back in the head that I was considering giving Cancer, this is actually very similar to the original Zodiac head from the combined mode. So I'm considering having this be Taurus's head, and then it will also form the combined mode head. On the original and my version, the head and hands had the parts form, but I'd like to avoid that this time around. Now, Taurus is a lot less straightforward than the other two Zodiacons. His transformation is much more complex, and on my version, I ended up simplifying it down quite a bit, and I really don't like what I ended up with. My last Taurus, I think, is probably the worst of the Zodiacons I've built, and that means I don't really have a solid foundation to build off of. Whereas Cancer last week was very much my old Cancer, but kind of given a facelift. Here I don't have a solid skeleton of a transformation, so it's probably going to be a lot more spitballing, and you might see me struggle a little bit more to get the ball rolling. But I do have a vague idea, and counter to what I did last week, for now I'm just going to focus on making the bull turn into the robot, and I'm not going to worry about the combined mode. So let's get to that. First things first, I want a solid base to build off of, and that's going to be this 2x4 plate. Then we want a neck for the bull, this mixel joint, and this other mixel joint. There we go. Now my thinking is that the head will be inside of the torso in robot mode, and then for combined mode kind of swing up like this. So we'll see how that all works out. Now, the original Taurus had this kind of interesting transformation where the side of the bull swung out and kind of wrapped around the head, and I'm going to see if I can more or less recreate that. So I'm realizing I might be better off if this is a 1x4, specifically the rounded kind. Unfortunately, I don't have any at my disposal, so for now I'm just going to make it two rounded 1x2s like this, and then this will serve as a joint for kind of the side of the bull to swing over and kind of swallow up the bull head. So now let's start on that. So I have these rounded plates, these rounded 1x3s, and you can see that sort of works as a nice little joint. And so you have robot mode configuration where the kind of the head is sort of swallowed up into the torso. bull mode configuration where the body can then go backwards. So I'm thinking that I want something here to support this joint, and it could be a good place to mount his shoulders. So let's do that. And then just as a placeholder, those could be kind of his shoulders, both in bull mode and in robot mode. I'm thinking his bull legs probably will become his robot mode arms. So that's kind of a placeholder. Then we can get this assembly here, which I just had off to the side. It's one of these bar studs and a D-snot put together. That can go on there. And oh, we're breaking it. That can go on there. So we have the body of the bull starting to shape up. Now, before we get too far, I want to add a head and also in the process clamp down this assembly so it's more solid. So let's just, oh, we're breaking it left and right. Just open it up. And I've just built this to be a brick tall so that then I can sandwich brackets over it. And then place a neck onto there. And then our head. So in robot mode, you'll have legs coming off of here, arms coming off of here, and a head. Then the head rotates back to hide away. Oops, we're breaking it. This is very fragile as of now. And then the head is in the body of the bull. You have the front legs of the bull, and the hind legs of the bull will connect here. So real quickly off camera, I just bulked this up to be much more durable. And now we're going to tile it off. So I'm going to grab my rounded tiles and my square tiles and just quickly tile it off, just so that it looks a little bit nicer. Okay. Now, I'll just show the thought process again. Now that it's a little bit more solid, and a little bit nicer looking. So, bull mode, you can see this is kind of the body mass of the bull. Then the hind half of the bull will be built off of this. And the front legs of the bull will be built off of this. And, you know, the head can articulate all kinds of ways. And then to transform, this will split open, swing down. And I guess the bull head could come forward kind of like this and get hugged by what will be the legs. The arms will attach here. In the head. So we're getting somewhere. Okay, throwing them back into bull mode, let's go ahead and start building the back half of the bull. We get some of these rounded slopes. And build back like this. Then we're going to need these for the hips of the bull. This might not be long enough for the bull. It's having a hard time focusing here. This might not be long enough for the torso of the bull, so we might have to make some changes later. But for now, I'm just going to see how it goes. And then, there we go. Now, if you remember my character Warhog, I'm going to do very similar hind leg design to what I did with Warhog, which is using inkwells as a hoof or a hoof. I never know how to pronounce that. Every way I say it, it sounds wrong. But so there's a hind leg that's probably a little bit shrimpy right now, so I might need a brick to extend it. So I just grabbed this little brick, extending it down. And there we go. That's more of a properly proportionate leg. So let's go ahead and build a second one, if I can find the piece I'm looking for. And there we go. That's a bull starting to take shape. Now the question is, will these form good enough legs? And right now, I'm thinking they're probably going to be kind of awkward legs. Yeah, like that's kind of a strange looking leg. Unless, yeah. So, not super great leg in robot mode, so we might want to rework some of how this works. And I have some ideas already. So, I'm just going to pop this off. And I'm thinking I might try and get another D-snot here and sandwich it with an inverted slope. And there we go. Now we have this. And we can get more of like a proper curvature here. So it's going to look more natural now, which is always a welcome thing. Grab a little bracket. That might be a little bit too big, so I might actually swap that out for one of these curved slopes. And then just for now, this. And last but not least, top that off with a tile. So now, arguably a nicer looking leg. And when we put him into robot mode, that now forms a much more convincing shaped robot mode hit leg as well. So I think that's a win-win. So I've gone ahead and duplicated that leg design, and while he's a little bit funky looking, we do have a robot starting to form. And I guess it's time to start thinking about the arms. So I'm going to throw this guy back into his cow mode. So here we have Taurus back in his cow mode, and the first thing I'm going to do is I think I'm going to add this rounded slope to sort of shape up the shoulder. I'm also thinking that when he transforms into robot mode, having this nice big bulk could kind of fill out this gap here. And then you have the arm kind of coming off of that. So that's my thought process right now so far. Oh, and I broke him again. So he's still a little bit fragile, but yeah. So again, like I pointed out, the arm's gonna have to come off in this direction. So I'm thinking if I can get one of these. For now, I'm just gonna do a very simple arm, just like this, kind of coming off of here, and then it will fold forward and have the ox leg, or the cow leg rather, attached to it. So and already you can see we're probably going to need a longer torso. So that's something to worry about once we have the arms on. But for now, I'm not going to worry about it. So we have that. So now we need a plate to sandwich this. And then a tile here. I could also make that a jumper so it pegs in, but I guess we'll see. Now, actually, what I might do is something like this, where instead of what I was going to do, because that would have gotten very bulky, let's just have this actually be the lower leg. And then I need an inkwell to be the hoof, however the heck you pronounce it, because I just can't seem to choose one. So ignoring their back half, I think that looks pretty proportional. And now we're just going to have to beef up the back half to actually match that. But before we do that, I'm going to mirror this, and then we'll transform them into robot mode and see how it looks. So the leg is now mirrored, and yeah, it looks pretty good, but let's transform him to see if it works in robot mode. So the arm kind of has to fold down to get out of the way of the whole torso swinging down. But then it can rotate. And there's an arm. Bring down the leg. And the other arm. Popped it off the robot hand, but so it's a little bit long and gangly. I could always position it more like this, where that could look good. That could be a good look. Rotate that. Then we have a robot forming. I guess the next thing we have to do is extend down the legs to be more proportional in cow mode. Okay, so we're gonna have to extend this rear section. So let's just pop it all off and bring in these larger slopes. Now I'm thinking I might actually reverse how the D-snot and this piece are to be like this. Or let me get a plate here. There we go. So his thigh is now meatier, and this sits up a little bit higher, which I just think looks better. But you can see this rear leg is higher than the lower leg, so we're going to need to fix that. I think it's 2 studs too high, not a full brick. Yeah, that seems about right. He's standing about straight. And then clamp that down with a 1x3. And now he's standing straight and looks much more proportional. So I'll mirror that on the other side. So there we go. We have a much more proportionate bull mode. I think it looks pretty good. But, of course, we're going to have to see how it looks in robot mode. And here we have him in his robot mode. It's a little bit awkward, but I think it works more or less. But before we go any farther, I think it's about time that we actually start thinking about combined mode and try and see if I can get this into anything vaguely resembling a torso. So to spare you seeing me just fiddle through and try and fan mode it into a torso, I'll do that off camera and come back when I have results. So shockingly, I actually found something, I think. This is a possible torso mode. You can see it's kind of just him scrunched up into a ball. The cow head is on the chest, or the bull head. It's just upside down now, which is maybe not ideal, but I think it looks okay. And the legs, the rear legs end up on the chest like they did on the original. And I can actually do the kind of the segmented color where the rear legs are gray and result in a gray chest plate that then is layered above a black chest plate. So that could be a cool look. One problem I thought I would run into is that there's nowhere to connect Cancer here. I thought I'd have to find some way to add a connection point, but then I realized that you can actually have the front legs kind of come together like this, and that I could reshape Cancer to be like this, and then these can actually peg together, and that could be a pretty cool look. He's kind of squat, but I think that's appropriate. The original Zodiac had very short legs, so I could kind of then reimagine him to be this kind of squat bruiser. And yeah, I think that could be a pretty good look. Now, alternatively, I could always just try and add something into here to have, an armature that could then connect it, the way it was supposed to be. So for now, I'm just going to quickly experiment with adding that armature to see if I can make that work. But if it doesn't, I think this is still a pretty good look. So I've opened up Taurus, and if we're going to add this armature, it's going to have to go right about here. So let's pop this open and unsandwich this all. That's the wrong part. I want this bottom bracket to come off. It's very tight in there. And we're going to replace this with a plate that has a connection point like that. And then let's just start very simple and straight up put some clip tiles onto here that can then connect some sort of brick assembly that can reach down to Cancer. So there we have that. Let's put the torso back together, sorry. And so now you have this connection point down here, and bringing in Cancer, let's get him back to how he was originally supposed to be. And now that connects him. That is too much, so let me see. How much midriff does he need? That could be, that works. I might even take this piece on Cancer and actually fold it, or not fold it, place it back so that the studs are on the front, and then there we go. So that also works, and I think that shouldn't affect any of the modes. I think that might be the better look. So that also then leaves these front legs back here to, I guess, just be some kibble. But I do think, compared to that first solution, this is just a little bit nicer, a little bit tidier. There we go. So here we have Taurus so far. He's a pretty decent looking bull. No tail. On the original, the tail had parts for him to be a weapon, and I suppose that's something I could always look into adding on this version. But head's on a ball joint. It can look left and right, up and down. There's some joints in the rear legs, but unfortunately the front legs are kind of locked in place. So, it's an okay beast mode. Now, let's get to transformation. So we just bring up the head there. Fold these arms down, or these legs down and out of the way. And then basically split the cow down the center, or the bull. Sorry, I keep calling it a cow, which I suppose is technically correct, but obviously he is a bull, and I should probably be calling him a bull. Now, Taurus, I would say at this stage, is still kind of rough. He's not as well formed as Cancer. There's still things that can be improved on him. But for now, he functions. And that's kind of part of designing Transformers. I consider it kind of two stages of completion. This is possible, and this is good. And sometimes you can jump right from just building to having something that's good, but sometimes you have to take a pit stop to know that what you're doing is actually possible. And with Taurus, because I didn't have that foundation that I did for Cancer, and I had to, basically start from scratch on him, we're stopping for now at this stage of it's possible. Yep, it's possible. We have a bull that turns into a guy and can turn into a torso. So let's talk about the areas that can get improved here. For one thing, I'm not super happy with these arms. They're very obviously just made from the cow's legs, and it just isn't a very nice look. It feels kind of weedy and just doesn't feel right for a character named Taurus. So I'd like to look into ways to add some more beef to his arms. Second, this whole transformation with the torso, while it's kind of interesting, it results in this very gappy torso. And, the legs are kind of awkward. They're just they don't, I feel like they don't come together very nicely. I suppose I could try rotating this to give him more articulation. That could be kind of a worthwhile thing to look into. But I also kind of want to consider if there's a way to have these joined together in the center to form a unified kind of pelvis, and then have the legs just be these. So he just has the cow legs for his legs. That could be something to look into. I'm also considering what it would take to make the bowl head too wide. That might be too wide for cow mode, for bull mode, but having it be 2 studs wide would help to fill in this gap and to make his torso feel a little bit more solid. So those are the areas I'm thinking I want to improve, and it's just a matter of figuring out how I'm going to make those improvements. So the first area I want to work on improving is the arms, because I have a vague idea for how I could do it. So we're going to swap out these lower sections for these plates with clips on them. Then that will actually be the arm, and we're going to get a bracket here, and it will come forward and sort of shape up his shoulder. So he has this very powerful looking shoulder. And then the leg can be one of these bar holder pieces, which I'm not sure if that's focusing very well. Like that. So he would end up with this very, very bulky shoulder and a little leg coming out the end. So I went ahead and mirrored that design on the other side, and I've run into an unexpected issue. He's now very front heavy. I didn't even consider that. So I'm thinking I might have to change the way that these legs work so that they're a little bit farther forward. So we might be kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing here, but you can return to that cone style leg. And then I just have to free up the inkwell. So this might now be kind of awkward kibble, so that's something to consider how I can fix later. But for now, he can actually stand again, so that's good. He can actually stand. Here we have him in robot mode, and yeah, I do think these arms look nicer. Definitely the way that the leg is just kind of poking off is awkward, so that's something to look into fixing. I might just put those back onto a bar connector here and have those fold back. But I think, the actual arm itself looks a lot nicer now. So I went ahead and started fiddling with Taurus off camera to try and consider ways to fix my issues with the hips. And I came up with this. The hips could kind of come back together like this, giving him the bull legs as his robot mode legs. And then I could, like I mentioned, considering in the beginning, kind of rip off auxiliary and have that be his robot mode head. It does mean the combined mode head is now just hanging out on his back, but I don't think that's a huge deal. It's just then a matter of kind of rejigging things so that this robot mode works better. But I actually kind of really like the proportions this gives him. It makes him feel a little bit more stocky, and that just feels right for Taurus. So what I'm going to need is to kind of get rid of some of the bulk here so that this whole section can swing forward and hopefully fill in the gap underneath this tile. So let's go ahead and try and do that. So what if we just swap out this rounded plate? This is not focusing. If this would focus. There we go. Swap this out for a 1x3. That might give the clearance for this to then... Yeah, that should give the clearance for this to rotate. So I'm going to do that on both sides, and I might actually add a brick with a stud on one side and a brick with a technical on the other, so that they'll actually peg together as well. So I've gone ahead and mirrored the design, and I think we have a much nicer looking robot now. This actually pegs together, and it's just a lot more solid looking, and he feels a lot more stocky. Yeah, the combine mode head is hanging out on the back, but I think all in all, I kind of prefer just this look. Now, I suppose I could always just have this head rotate down and end up on his stomach and go back to using this head. Oops, I broke him. But again, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of that, though I guess I could get used to it. We'll see. I'll probably go back and forth between those two and end up choosing one eventually. So here we have Taurus, and he is able to stand, but as you can see, it's not very easy to get him standing. But he is able to stand if you balance him just right. And I might have to look into finding ways to give him better feet. But for now, I think this is where I'm calling it quits. I'm calling him done for now. So, he's this stocky little guy. Looks pretty cool. And I guess let's transform him into his bull mode. And just bring the arms back. Slide that back up. Separate the waist and fold it back up like this. Then bring the legs around and bring the waist back together like that. Then just fold up the arms. Bring down the head, and then there's this cheese slope, which I think looks better if it rotates. There you have him in bull mode. I think it's a pretty good bull mode. Decent little bull. He stands very solidly, of course, in this mode because he's on all fours. And yeah, no tail. Like I said, I can always look into possibly adding that as a parts forming piece. But I'll look into that later, and I'll probably update you with that in the next video. But for now, let's get him into his combined mode. Now, as of now, there's no real plan for how these arms are going to kind of work into it. They don't really have anywhere to go. They end up just as kibble, but just swing them out of the way and bring the head up. And we're more or less, it seems like we're going back into robot mode. But then once you have this folded down, this will now come up and the leg will swing over and sort of look like that, where we're actually, sorry, I swung it forward the wrong way. You want this so that then you can see it forming kind of a chest plate there. So second verse, same as the first. Oh, I broke him. So you have a chest plate. Then this rotates to be his head. And underneath, oh, the arms are blocking it. So get the arms out of the way. You just pull out the connection port. So then let's bring in Cancer, who is off to the side here. He will peg onto Cancer. Get the arms back and out of the way. And bring the camera back. You can see Zodiac starting to take shape. And yeah, I think combine mode is pretty cool. And that is Taurus. So I guess you'll see me next time when I work on Pisces. And hopefully by then I'll have Taurus a little bit more refined. And I'll see you then.